Okay, welcome to Rider X as an X-ray to the FARBAR contract. All right, so this is called the kickout clause. You may have heard of this before. Let's read. I got a little bit of lengthy description up here. Let's read it, and then we'll go over a few things in the body of the rider. This rider is used in tandem with the home to sale contingency. It is used when the seller wishes to continue to entertain backup offers while the primary buyer is attempting to sell their existing home. Pay special attention or note the 3-day window for the buyer to deliver additional escrow if notified of a legitimate backup offer. We'll talk about that in a second. If you represent the seller and the seller is willing to go with this type of contract, I suggest you shorten the window to 1 day. 3 days is too much because they either can or can't buy if you get another offer. And if they can remove their contingency and buy anyway, they should be able to notify you within 1 day. You don't want to leave the second offer hanging for 3 days while you're trying to see what the first one's going to do, because then your second offer may get skittish and say, hey, look, I can't wait that long, I'm out of here. If you represent the buyer, understand that delivering the additional earnest money, as we will see here in a second, the buyer is, and I put this in all caps, is waiving their financing by their and home to sell contingencies, right? So they're completely waiving that if they deliver that earnest money, and their earnest money is totally at risk as it relates to those items. The buyer needs to be completely clear on this. Listen to the audio, which we'll talk about when we get down to the body a little bit. As of the date of this recording, the huge downside to the seller is that when we mark it pending with a kickout clause, when we go to contract with a kickout clause, it says we can continue to market the home. Unfortunately, currently the MLS mandates that the property be placed as pending in the MLS. This severely reduces the chance of another offer coming in because no one's going to see it in the MLS. They're only looking for active properties, not pending, and allowing the seller to kick out the first offer. So what I'm saying is that the chances of getting another offer in, it has to come from an open house you do or somebody happen to be driving by, all right? So it's very difficult. Well, I'm trying to get this. I've been working with the MLS to try and get them to amend this rule, and if we can get any update on that, we'll certainly let you know. All right, so let's get down to the body of this. So what's happening is the buyer has brought an offer. They've agreed on price and terms and everything else, except that the buyer is notified that is notifying the seller that they have a home to sell, which we do in the home to sell contingency, and the seller comes back and says, well, that's all well and good, but I'm not going to wait forever for your home to sell. So in the meantime, I'm going to continue to market this home, and if I get another offer, I'm going to notify you of that offer, and then I'm going to give you, in this case, it says 3 days. You've heard of above. I suggest only 1 day to decide what you're going to do. Get out of our way and let us move on with another offer, or put in additional money, and that's your notification to me that you are intending to move on without, and we'll read this in red, you've lost your financing contingency and your home to sell contingency. So don't come to me saying that didn't happen, because I'm going to keep all the earnest money. All right, so let's read. That's essentially what it says, but let's see how it says it. Seller will have the right to continue to show the property and solicit into other bona fide backup purchase contracts, like I said. Again, downside is that it has to go pending in MLS, which really hampers your ability to get another offer. But if you did get another offer, upon entering into a backup contract, the seller will give the buyer, the one who has the home to sell, a copy of the backup contract with the third party's identification and purchase price information obliterated. To continue with this primary contract, this buyer must make an additional deposit of, and you could say $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, whatever is negotiated, to the escrow agent within 3 days. Now, again, here's where I say we should change that to 1 day from receipt of the backup contract. By giving the additional deposit, now if you're on the buy side of this, by giving that additional $6,000, $8,000, $2,000, whatever you negotiate, deposit to the escrow agent within the 1 day in this case, the buyer waives all contingencies for financing and sale of buyer's property, and all parties will close on the closing date. The additional deposit will be credited to the buyer at closing, if it closed. If the buyer fails to timely make the additional deposit, if they don't put the extra money in within that 1 day or 3 days or whatever's negotiated, right, then this primary contract shall terminate. It means this one's gone, and the seller can move on with their other offer that came in, that initiated the kick-out time clock ticking. and the buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller from all further negotiations or obligations under the contract. So, real life scenario, you're under contract, the buyer has a home to sell. Seller says, fine, but I'm going to continue to market the home. You're under contract for 2 weeks. 2 weeks down the road, the seller gets another offer from somebody else and says, hey, look, I got to tell you, I've got a pending contract. However, we have a kick-out clause, which means we only have 1 day. So if you get me that offer, we'll negotiate it. If we can come to terms, we have to make it a backup, but only for 1 day. And 1 day I'll get back to you and let you know whether the first buyer is going to move on and get out of our way and let us work with you, or is going to continue on with the contract, and I'll let you know in 1 day. So you do it, you go back to the buyer and say, hey, look, per our agreement 2 weeks ago, you have to put another $5,000 into escrow within 1 day. If not, and by the way, here's a copy of my backup contract. And if not, then if you don't do it, then we're done and we're going to move on with this other offer. If you do, then you're waiving your financing contingency and your home to sell contingency. Then the first buyer here has a decision to make. They make the decision to put in the extra $5,000. That kicks in the red area here by giving the additional deposit. Then they're waiving all that and they're going to closing, and they can't use financing as an out. They can use some of the other outs, which I don't know, maybe they're still in the inspection period. Maybe they can't use loan approval anymore. Maybe they had an appraisal contingency in there and it doesn't appraise and they can still get out. Whatever is in there, they can still utilize other than financing and home to sell, all right? And hopefully it all works out and everybody goes to closing. But just be careful if you're the buyer's agent, representative, make sure they know this. And if you're the listing agent and the seller and you're accepting this, make sure you know your seller is aware that they can continue to market, but right now they have to pend it in the MLS, which could be a problem. All right, if you have any questions, as always, let us know.